Listen to this podcast now on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
Why is the middle class shrinking? Why are people facing an affordability crisis while marginalized individuals called informals grow in numbers? Join me as I travel the world, speaking with people living in invisibility, the leaders working to solve it, and uncovering the hard truths shaping our economy and daily reality.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform. The More Money Show with Steve Moore on the Red Apple Podcast Network.
We're back, folks. This is the More Money Show. Hope you're having a wonderful Easter weekend. My next guest, by the way, is a longtime friend and someone who I so greatly admire for his great service to our country. I'm talking about Congressman Bob Livingston, former Congressman Bob Livingston from the great state of Louisiana, who I say this, and he's always saying, oh, I didn't do it myself. But this is the guy who really is so responsible for those only balanced budgets we've had in Washington over the last 50 years came when Bob Livingston was running the Appropriations Committee in the House. And as you know, they are the ones who control the spending. And he held the spending down. And in those Clinton years, we actually did have balanced budgets. So first of all, Bob, I just want to salute you for your great service to our country.
Well, thank you very much for that great introduction, Steve, but I don't know that I deserve all the credit. Actually, there are quite a lot of other people, including Newt Gingrich and Ted Stevens and others, who pitched in. So it was a great effort, and I think it's one that we could all be very proud of.
Well, you should be especially, and obviously Newt Gingrich and Dick Armey and others. And by the way, Bill Clinton now also deserves a big part of the credit for that as well. So, but that's not why I wanted you on, Bob, for because we talked about that a few weeks ago when you were on the show, but we never really got to your great new book, called The Rainbow Chaser. And there's so many reasons this book is important, but one of the themes of the book is something that is very troubling to me, Bob Livingston, and that is the outrageous prosecutorial misconduct in our justice system today. I know so many people who have been put in jail or, in some cases for 5, 10, 15, 20 years for offenses that were it was a political mistrial, essentially, that happened where you've got in my opinion, you've got prosecutors who are putting their political enemies in jail. It is disgusting. It's outrageous. It happened to you. Well, you didn't go to jail, but they'll bankrupt you if they charge you at the thing. So tell people about your story, because it's happened way too often in our justice system.
Thanks, Steve. The fact is, I was a prosecutor for 6 years. Before I went to Congress. And I think that law and order demands that conscientious prosecutors do their job, along with conscientious investigators, FBI agents, policemen, and so forth. If they do it right, they develop probable cause, they find a crime, they find out who did the crime, they prosecute the people that did the crime. That's within the justice system that this democracy of ours demands. But it's an incredible amount of authority vested in the hands of crooked cops or crooked prosecutors, people who push cases against innocent people for reasons that, for no reasons, just simply because they don't like them or because they want to make targets out of them. And if they're misused, if that process is misused, it becomes tyrannical. And it's an abusive process, but more importantly, as you pointed out, it just destroys the lives of the people who are victims of that kind of activity.
Well, Bob, tell people about your particular case, because it just I can fill this show with people who have stories of how prosecutors have come after people because of their political views. And I don't care if it's liberal view or conservative view, but politics should not be part of our justice system.
Exactly, and as a former prosecutor, the last thing in the world I expected was that it would be aimed at me. I did a couple of years in the United States Navy. I did 6 years as a criminal prosecutor in all state, local, federal, and I did 22 years in Congress. I formed a good business in Washington, D.C., a lobbying business, and we complied with every degree of the law possible. But in essence, when the Biden administration came into office, they went after Republicans of all forms. Any Republican who of note was declared an enemy of the Justice Department under Garland, under the Attorney General there. And he used a guy by the name of Jack Smith, who went after tons of innocent people, using the Beria crime of Stalin's investigator, Levente Beria, who said, show me the man and I'll show you the crime. In effect, they just went after people because of who they were, not because of what they did. And that's exactly what they did.
What did they accuse you of?
Let Century Management Solutions get you to your next medical appointment. They specialize in non-emergency medical transportation, connecting patients to care, safety, reliability, and on time. Their advanced technology platform seamlessly coordinates patients, healthcare providers, insurers, and transportation partners all in one powerful network. With over 200 trusted transportation providers, they deliver scalable solutions backed by real-time tracking and complete transparency. Go to SENTRYMS.com.
They brought a search warrant to me for me and my firm, alleging that I had violated the terms of the Foreign Agents Registration Act, which is called FARA. And they said essentially that I had violated it, not sufficiently reported. Well, Steve, I want to tell you, in 28 years, we religiously reported everything all the time. We represented, at one point in 2018, a lady who ran against Zelensky of Ukraine for president of Ukraine, Yulia Tymoshenko. We reported it. We represented her only for 10 months. And we reported virtually everything under the law as we were required to do, and we told her that we were going to have to do that.
Oh, my
Coincidentally, there was a Democrat firm in Washington, D.C. that represented her for 4 years. They didn't report anything. Guess who was investigated?
Right.
We were. We were investigated, and they weren't. And they came at us. It cost me 20 months of grief, a hell of a lot of money for very expensive lawyers. And when we finally find an 88-page brief, the lawyers convinced the Justice Department that they didn't have a case, and then they didn't do anything until the statute of limitations ran out. They said, well, never mind. But it still cost me all of that problem. Other people haven't been so lucky. We weren't charged.
Right.
But they did come at me, and just because they came at me, it cost it cost me a hell of a lot of my business.
Well, Bob, I know exactly what you're talking about because I have so many other colleagues and friends who've gone through the same prosecutions that you have, and actually persecution is a better word than prosecution. And what my sense of this, and by the way, I had a somewhat similar case involving myself, but it was more of an IRS tax issue. But the IRS claimed that my wife and I owed, I don't know, about $150,000 in taxes. We had no idea how they came up with that money and that dollar amount. They never even told us. They just said, you owe us this money, pay up. And we had a tax accountant, 2 tax accountants. We spent thousands and thousands of dollars. And the tax accountant, I'm not joking, Bob. The tax accountant said, look, we've redone your taxes. We actually think the IRS owes you some money. But what the tax accountant said is just pay the money because it's going to cost you so much to contest this with the IRS. It's going to cost you more money. And so they use the fact that we as individuals have limited budgets, but the government has an unlimited budget to go after you.
Well, they really do. And if they charge somebody, and no matter how tough they make it, they can make you go to trial in a state outside of your own. You have to pay witnesses. You have to pay costs. You have to pay the lawyers. You pay this and that. They literally bankrupt you before you can prove your innocence. In this country, we're told that you're innocent until proven guilty. But when you up against the United States government, they can come at you and they ignore that rule because all they have to do is pick you out of a crowd, go after you, and you've got to pay money. And if you can't pay the money, like some of those people in the January 6th deal, they couldn't pay the money, so they pled guilty to felonies that they weren't even guilty of.
It's so frightening because, folks, the reason I wanted Bob out, this could happen to any of us. It's happened to me. It's happened to Bob Livingston. I have a guy I've been fighting for his case for now 2 years named Caleb Bailey, who literally is in jail for 12 years, and his crime was being a Trump delegate. And I'm not exaggerating. They raided his home. They found, you have 3 unregistered guns. They put him in jail. And, this is so troubling to me, Bob, because we need a justice system that is fair and equitable. What they've done to you and others is cruel. It is not a balanced system. And the problem is it's become so political. I mean, can you imagine going, if I were charged with a crime as a Trump person going in front of a jury in Washington, D.C., I would have no chance.
That's not far-fetched at all, Steve. My book, The Rainbow Chaser, has a bunch of examples, maybe 15 or 20 examples of people who that happened to exactly. In some cases, they went all the way to the trial. Ted Stevens, I mentioned earlier, was tried and convicted 3 weeks before his election. He lost his election, and 2 months later, the judge threw the whole case out, saying the prosecutors had fudged on the case, and it didn't matter. After a generation of helping Alaska and representing this country nobly and ably, the poor guy lost his election, and for no reason. He couldn't put it all pieces back together. Plus, it cost him a fortune in attorney's fees.
Well, by the way, you may recall the case in the early 1980s of Ray Donovan, who was Ronald Reagan's labor secretary, who was accused of a crime. And, of course, he was totally exonerated, but he had to resign his position. And he very famously said, Bob, okay, now how do I get my reputation back? Because your reputation is destroyed by these people.
It is indeed. In fact, there was a similar case against Ronald Reagan's Secretary of EPA, whose name escapes me this minute, but he was charged with 29 felony charges about 6 years after he left the Reagan cabinet, and in 1 year it cost him a fortune. But he convinced them that he wasn't guilty of any of the felonies, and just to get them off the back, he pled guilty to one misdemeanor because he couldn't afford them again for any longer, and the attorney's fees were bankrupting him, and he had no choice.
So, Bob, we just have one or two minutes left. I'm talking to Bob Livingston, former chairman of the Appropriations Committee, who was one of the men responsible for our balanced budgets when we had them. My last question is, Bob, what do we do about this? How do we fight back? Well,
we expose it, and that's what my book is about, the Rainbow Chaser, and I hope people will read it. I'm hoping that the Congress will pass a law that says when a prosecutor or an investigator makes a case against an individual because of who he is and not what he did, without probable cause or evidence, that prosecutor or investigator can be charged with a crime civilly or criminally, and can actually go to prison for it, because they ruin people's lives. They have that kind of power, and they have to be responsible.
It's just very scary. And if you're someone who's a Trump supporter, as I am, you're worried that if the Democrats take over, they're coming after us, folks. They're coming after us because we love Donald Trump. And I think that's outrageous. It's not justice. It's injustice. Bob Livingston, thanks so much for coming on the show. The book is The Rainbow Chaser. You can get it on Amazon. And folks, this is The More Money Show. We will be back in 2 minutes.
Thanks for listening to More Money with Steve Moore. You can hear More Money with Steve Moore Saturday afternoons at 1. If you like the podcast, share it with your friends and listen anytime at WABCRadio.com and download the WABC Radio app. Hit that subscribe button on all major podcast platforms. Plus, follow WABC on social on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and X. See you next time for a new episode, so you never have to wonder,
what the heck is going on here?
Listen to this podcast now on the Red Apple Podcast Network. The Leadership Thread with Dr. Peggy Polonis.
I'm Dr. Peggy Polonis. Join me on each episode where I unravel the story that shaped leaders, tracing the thread that led them where they are today. Because leadership isn't born in adulthood. And thank you once again for joining us on the Leadership Thread, education, ethics, and sustainability.
Download all of Red Apple Media's podcasts right now through your favorite podcast platform.